girls, grab your beers.
Hey everybody, this is Charlie from Anthrax, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle.
This is Mark Metcalf, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle with Bailey on Domain Cleveland Radio.
You are listening to today's Boondoggle with Bailey on Domain Cleveland Radio. Yes, Kato Kalin listens to this all the time.
Welcome to today's Boondoggle. Now here's your host.
I am Monty Heath, so one Heath, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle.
Hey, what's up? It's John from Skillet, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle on Domain Cleveland Radio.
Fasten your seatbelts.
Incarceration, America's rock, metal, and tattoo festival with Slipknot. Falling in Reverse, Five Finger Death Punch, plus Marilyn Manson, 3 Days Grace, Beartooth, Knocked Loose, Lamb of God, Parkway Drive, I Prevail, In This Moment, and so many more. Report to the Ohio State Reformatory on July 18th through 20th, 2025 to face your sentencing. 3 days of rock, tattoos, and the return of the Haunted Blood Prison. Passes for Incarceration are on sale now at incarceration.com. Zombified.
What's going on, everybody? It's Bill Bailey with today's Boondoggle. And real quick housekeeping note, if you're watching us on Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, Odyssey, please hit that follow and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever podcast platform you utilize, please hit that follow and subscribe button so we can continue to bring you conversations like the one I'm bringing you today. I'm excited, man. I'm talking with renowned guitarist and composer Bumblefoot. What's going on, man?
How are you? I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Nice. Yeah, like we were saying before we went on the air, I figure we were in the same time zone, you know. Mm-hmm. Getting up and knocking these out. I have my coffee with me, getting ready to have a conversation.
Finished mine on the way to the studio, and yeah, I should be awake by halfway through this.
All right, sounds good. So there's so much I want to talk about, especially your latest release. But usually when I have somebody on for the first time, I want to get a quick background. So do you remember what you originally wanted to be when you grew up?
Oh, absolutely. I was a little kid, and it was everything. I want to be an astronaut and a fireman and a police dog, and like all that kind of stuff. And then the Kiss Alive album had just come out. In 1975, I was 5 years old, turning 6, and I heard that, and it's like, that's what I want to do. So my two loves as a kid were rock music, being in a band, that whole thing, just bands, rock bands, and crazy outer space stuff, cosmology, astrophysics, all that kind of stuff, just what makes the universe what it is. All those mysteries. So those were my two favorite things. So when I started off, the first song I ever wrote when I was 6 years old was called Jupiter is Nice. And I stole the melody from Fox on the Run from Sweet because I was too young. I had nothing to draw from to make my own melodies or ideas. So it was just, Jupiter is nice, do-do-do, take my advice, do-do-do, I skate on the ice, little 6-year-old kid. And I wanted to be a drummer. I didn't want to be a guitar player, but my brother wanted to be a drummer, so he became the drummer. And then I wanted to be a bassist, because Gene Simmons, fire and the blood and the bat wings and everything. So I wanted to be a bass player. So I went to a music store to start taking lessons. And they look at me, this tiny little kid. They didn't have any kid-sized basses, and they didn't want to lose a sale. So they lied to my mom and said, well, in order to become a bass player, you have to play guitar for 2 years. And then you could graduate up to bass. So they conned us into 2 years of guitar lessons, and then I just stuck with guitar, and it became 8 years of just studying all the academic stuff and music theory and classical and jazz. And I would go home after school and just jam in the basement, and had a band where we would do a ton of covers, just all the, just typical rock covers, the same ones that people cover now. What do we do? Like Brick in the Wall just came out, so we would do that. What else? Ramones covers. Pretty much classic rock and a little bit of punk. Yeah, just whatever was popular for young kids in the 70s into the 80s. Then it turned into metal and covering Maiden and Priest when we got a better singer, and a ton of Rush, and just always writing my own music and recording. The recording started at the very beginning at 6 years old, where we would take a cassette recorder and we would record the music on it with our little kid nylon string guitars like a foot away from the cassette recorder. And my brother had a Bugs Bunny drum set he got at Sears about 10 feet back. And that's how we got the levels right. And then we would play the music and use a second cassette recorder like 2 inches away from it that would be recording the music playing while we would sing along, and we would overdub vocals that way. So we figured out how to multi-track using cassette recorders as little kids. And that's how we made demos. And then we would put on concerts in my basement, my backyard, at the school we went to. And I would cut up pieces of paper on show day and make cups of confetti for the audience to throw in the air. And we did everything our idols were doing. Yeah, and it just never stopped and just kept on going. And it was so funny because 30 years later, I'm playing Madison Square Garden, and we had confetti cannons that are shooting all the confetti into the air. And I was just laughing to myself, thinking of just the little kid cutting up confetti and just thinking, I'm glad I didn't have to cut up the confetti for this show.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you stick with it. That's the lesson. Stick with it.
Kiss Alive was my gateway as well. I remember a Christmas morning, my sister was getting albums, and she was big into like Leif Garrett and Rod Stewart and stuff. And for some reason, somebody got her Kiss Alive. She opened it up and she's like, "Ew, what is this?" And I'm across the room and I'm just like, and
yep.
Then it became mine, and that was it, man.
Yeah, that album, it did it. There was something magical in that album that just launched a million kids like into being rock musicians and rock fans. It was just the perfect album for kids.
Yeah, the visual and everything, just like, pulled you in. Yeah. And then you were fun. It was funny too when you were talking about mixing on cassette tapes, because it's like, when I was a little kid, like Johnny Carson and all that stuff was like, I grew up watching him and be like, man, I want to be like that. So I'd make my own shows and do voices and everything and record on cassette tapes. And then, unfortunately, I didn't keep pursuing this, and chose a different path. But now in my older days, my youth dreams are being fulfilled as I'm chasing after the podcast now. So here I am, coming full circle, man.
Wonderful. That's great.
And then so you got into performing at an early age, and you said you're cutting your own confetti and having, doing the shows. When did you become Bumblefoot?
So I just kept going on that path of wanting to be in a band where we all wrote, we all played, we all sang, just everything like Kiss and the Beatles, my two favorite bands as a kid growing up, and all the other bands that I loved. So I just kept doing it, and whatever I learned, I would teach. So after years of learning music, I started teaching it. After years of recording, and the recordings getting better, I started recording other bands. And everything just kept expanding, and the circle kept getting bigger, and started playing bars when I was like 14. And those, the gigs got better, and then you start playing with your friends' bands and just having cover bands for fun, and when you're a teenager and all this kind of stuff. And I would make these silly little guitar songs just for my own amusement, just funny, strange songs. And there was a guitar magazine that was doing write-ups on unknown guitar players. And everyone said, you should send these to the magazine. I was like, I don't know, these are just, for fun. It's not what I'm looking to do. But I sent them in, and I got a write-up from a guy named Mike Varney that had a label called Shrapnel Records, which was all guitar players. It was like the whole guitar scene of guitar music. He was the one delivering it to the masses. And he offered me to put a band together and sign to the label and do some crazy guitar music. And I told him, no, I'm looking to do vocal music and be in some normal rock band. But we stayed friends, and I did do some one-offs for his label and his brother's label, Mark. He had a label called Legato Records, and they would put out these comp CDs of just all different guitar players, just one song from each one. So I did a bunch of those for Legato and for Shrapnel. And then it was the early 90s. I was dating this veterinary student who is now my wife. And next month it'll be 35 years together. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks. So one of the diseases that she was learning about, ulcerative pododermatitis, also known as Bumblefoot. And it was just such a silly name. And the treatment for it, she was saying how turkeys get it. And one of the treatments is to rub hemorrhoid cream on their feet. And the whole thing was just so absurd that I just got inspired, and I wrote a song called Bumblefoot about a superhero. Look up in the sky, it's got 5 toes and it can fly, is that Bumblefoot? And so this is all the long answer leading up to your question. So Mike Varney, Shrapnel Records, they said they were going to make a version, like an offshoot of the label that does music with vocals. And he asked if I'd be interested, and I said, yeah. So I signed the deal in 1994, and it was going to be, what I was hoping to do, which is, rock music with vocals. And once I signed, once the blood on the contract dried, he said, well, just to introduce you to the fan base of our record label, we'd like you to do an instrumental guitar album, which is not what I wanted to do. But okay, I signed, I'm honoring the deal, I'll do it. So I had this idea of calling it The Adventures of Bumblefoot and having like a comic bookish type album art cover, and every song would be named after a different animal disease, weird animal diseases. Strawberry foot rot, fistulus withers, blue tongue, all the weird diseases I learned secondhand while helping my wife study. And we put out this crazy album that was so different from what was on his label, because everything on the label was more of a instrumental neoclassical vibe, like Yngwie Malmsteen type stuff, or fusion stuff. And I come out with these weird, bizarre songs. And then from there, did a vocal album. And then the deal was done. I started my own record label just to put out my own music, and got distributors around the world and did everything, and continued on my intended path, which was to do vocal music. So I would do these, I don't know how you could describe the music. It was a little quirky, sort of System of a Down-ish, Faith No More-ish early on. And I sang, and I wrote, and I recorded, and I had a band, and we would play, and we would do shows. And at that point, it made sense to call the band Bumblefoot, because the music was weird, so it fit. It was a fitting name. And continuing with that over the years, after a while, just fronting it, it became like a nickname. So it was a song, it was a disease that became a song, that became an album, that became a band, that became a nickname. And that's the long answer. Yes.
That's amazing, though. Yeah, and it's great that you and your wife about to celebrate 35 years. You were saying,
yeah,
together. And in the rock and roll world, that's like not heard of too much. So thankfully, animal diseases have strengthened the bond and.
Yes, and she's a very tolerant human being putting up with me. So that too.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I remember, like when I went on my last deployment, I got familiar with some of your catalog because I used to do concert promotions and album reviews and stuff like that. And I would get CDs mailed to me before everything was like streaming and downloadable and all that. And so I filled up my iPod, so I had music to listen to while I was deployed. And around that time frame, your album Abnormal came out, and I had that on play
nice. Very
during
cool.
my deployment and stuff. So yeah. And then getting ready for this interview, I was going through some more of the catalog, and one of your other songs that I really enjoyed was Little Brother Is Watching. You want to talk a little bit about the message or inspiration in that song? Does that go back to what we were talking about before we went on the air?
Mm-hmm. So I figure it was 11 years ago when I wrote that song. The album came out 10 years ago. And it was just how we all had in our hands the ability to monitor each other and share what we see and spread it around. Like 1984, they thought of this omnipresent, big brother watching us. But really what it was at that point was just millions of little brothers all collectively watching and policing. And so I wrote a song about that, and I called it Little Brother Is Watching. And that became the album title as well. And I guess it's something that no one thought about or planned on or predicted in the future. They thought that there would be more of this monitoring government watching us all. And they didn't ever plan on the people watching over everything and having that ability, no matter how much we might try to be censored, that we do have that ability to expose and share what we see.
Yeah, well, it's like, the government works smarter, not harder. Why don't we just put the people to work for us?
Yeah. Now, you were saying deployment. Oh, where were you?
My last deployment was in Kuwait. Wow. With I was in the Navy. I'm retired Navy.
Well, God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
And when going back to the Navy, I remember, after high school and stuff, when I first signed up and went to the Navy, one of the second tattoos I ever got, because it was still one of my all-time favorite bands, was GunsNRoses, and you spent some time with Axl Rose, who I guess I share a name with, Bill Bailey.
Yeah, same names.
Yeah. And what was that time of your career like?
Well, I was deployed for 8 years in GunsNRoses, and it was certainly a roller coaster. Yeah, it's everything you can imagine, and a lot of things you can't. Yeah, the highs were high, the lows were low, and it was a lot of intensity, and definitely inspiring for the album Abnormal, because life certainly became interesting. If I could kind of dumb it down and use one word to describe it all. Yes.
Yeah, I saw you guys play here in Cleveland when you were with them at that time. And, obviously one of my earliest shows in high school was GunsNRoses when Use Your Illusion was coming out. And I think Sebastian Bach was still in Skid Row, and they opened up for him. And that was an amazing tour as a kid, in high school. That was still one of my favorites all the time. And then, follow GunsNRoses career. And how much input did you have with the Chinese Democracy album?
Well, most of the songs, like the foundation was already there and a lot of tracks were laid. So it was all about finding what to play that didn't step on anything else and that added something of value to the song. So, for example, we'll start with the song Chinese Democracy. The verses, they had all this empty space in them and just sort of atmospheric sounds going on. So I took that fretless guitar and I just added these like low, draggy, you know, riffs in there. Just kind of bluesy, dragging, sludgy, drudgy riffs.
Nice.
So that worked. And, you know, certain songs I would have, what was next? Shacklers, that one. I did the guitar solos and extra parts in the verses and all throughout, and all the crazy tapping stuff. At the end, there was that tapping pattern. It was like, and all that. Where'd it go from there? Still remember it. So yeah, added a lot of stuff. It would be like 14 hours a day in studios in New York and LA, depending on where we were at the time, in between legs of touring. And I would just play all different ideas. And Karam, the wonderful producer of the album, it would be the two of us in the room, and we would just experiment, try different things. I would do something fretless, something fretted, something clean, something dirty, something bluesy, something technical, and give them a lot to work with. And then they would choose what they felt was best for the song, as they would sift through 100 tracks of chaos that I would lay down.
Nice. So yeah, you liken that to kind of like a deployment. How did you, though? I mean, I know with like my last deployment, you know, I went in kind of like, you know, I was individually grabbed. I didn't go with my unit. You know, I was individually grabbed and kind of put in with a bunch of people from all across the country, you know, that started as strangers, but by the end of the deployment, you know, we become like family and stuff. Yeah. Would you say something, how was the environment with you and the rest of that, the GunsNRoses guys at that time?
You know, I was the new guy. So in the beginning, it was, you know, getting used to each other. And yeah, did 8 years, played a lot of shows, hopefully made a lot of people happy. And that's it. And then it was time to move on and get back to doing everything else that I love doing, the producing, teaching, my own music, building bands from the ground up, like Sons of Apollo, Art of Anarchy, Whom Gods Destroy, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I noticed too that you had some time in Asia as well. What was that time like?
That was wonderful. Yeah, such wonderful guys. So that came about when in 2016 there was this sort of fun band that got together. It was Carmine Appice on drums, Rudy Sarzo on bass, Jeff Downs from Yes in Asia on keys, Phil Narrow, he was the singer of Talus, wonderful singer, great guy. He was on vocals, I was on guitar, and another guitarist, Gene Cornish from the band The Rascals, was on guitar. So it was an interesting mix. And we did all kinds of music from our backgrounds, and we did a show in Toronto and Chicago, and that was it. And it was fantastic. We had such a good time. So from that's how I met Jeff Downs from Asia. So they were touring in 2017. They were going to open for Journey. They did open for Journey. And they asked if I would join on guitar. And I was pretty busy that year. I was putting Sons of Apollo together and doing a lot of touring and getting the Sons album out. So it just wasn't a good time to take off and hit the road. But then in 2019, they were touring again, opening for Yes, and they asked again if I would play guitar, and I was like, hell yeah.
Nice.
So I started learning the songs, and then they had someone who was going to be singing, who unfortunately turned out he was unable to do it. So they said, "Why don't you sing? You could sing. You sing it." And I said, "Okay." And then I'm thinking to myself, how the hell am I going to play these guitar parts while sing the parts from a different human being that don't connect, and just basically have to split my brain in two and sing like someone else? That's not the kind of voice I have. Like, I don't sound like John Wetton. And what I did is I just spent 2 months, 8 hours a day in this room practicing and unlearning how to sing and relearning how to sing like him. And just getting it where I would change sounds with my right foot on a voice box thing that had different reverbs and delays and harmonies and stuff, so that I would have that taken care of. And then with my left foot, another box on the floor that had all the changes of the different guitar sounds, from clean to dirty to boosting for the solos, and then coordinating to sing one set of parts while playing totally different guitar parts that don't anchor down at the same times. And so getting that down so that I'd be comfortable and ready when it's time to do it in front of thousands of people. And
you weren't kidding about splitting the brain up, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had to have two brains, which is difficult because I barely have one. So, yeah, and the band were fantastic. They were such great guys and so rock solid and just great to hang with, and the music was wonderful and the crowds were wonderful. And the goal at that point was to make people reminisce. I wanted them to close their eyes and feel like they're hearing that first Asia album in 1982 when it first came out, and to have that feeling. Because I know what that's like. Like when you hear music that just takes you back to a time in your life that just, I didn't want to take that away from anybody. I wanted to make sure that they got that. So I had to really undo myself and rebuild for Asia and make sure that I had it down that way, and did the best I could. And hopefully I was able to do that for people and serve the music the right way and serve the songs. That's what it's about. It was not about me. It was about those songs and that band and that crowd, and making sure that I was channeling everything that they were looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like going on like a spiritual pilgrimage, you know, unlearning what we've been taught to relearn to provide that. That's awesome. And then I wanted to ask more about the Art of Anarchy project that you mentioned. How did that come together for you?
So that goes back to the late 90s. There were these twin brothers, John and Vince, sweet kids, teenage kids, and I would record their band at my studio back then. And years later, it was like 2011, we always stayed friends and everything, and it said they wanted to make their dream album, the album they never got to make. They had these 10 songs written, and one was a guitar player, one was a drummer, and they want to get different singers to sing on different songs and just make an album of their music with all their favorite people on it as guests. So we started recording the music, and as we did, I would lay down a solo here and there and add some guitar parts, and we started reaching out to singers. And Scott Weiland was the first one to say yes, and he recorded a song, and it was fantastic what he did. He really had this way about him of coming up with things you never would have thought of for that song, any song. That there's a reason that he was who he was. Yeah, just phenomenal. So then after doing the one song, his team suggested we make this a band. Said, how about he does the whole album and we make this a band? And from there we reached out to John Moyer, bassist of Disturbed, and he's like, yeah, I'd love to play with you guys. And it became a band and an album, and and we put out that first album in 2015, right after Little Brother Is Watching. That year put out both those albums, and sadly Weiland passed. Then it was the question of, do we end it or find another singer? And then the guys told me, we've been speaking with Scott Stapp and he's interested. I was like, okay. So we flew down to Florida to jam with him, and it felt like there was a vibe, and we made another album that came out in 2017 with Scott Stapp. And we did a couple of shows, and yeah, then the pandemic hit, and it was going to pretty much stop there. But during the pandemic, suddenly there was so much time to do all the things that no one had time for, which is really what made this new Bumblefoot album happen. And also, that's when Derek Sherinian, the keyboardist, my bandmate in Sons of Apollo and Whom Gods Destroy, that's when we started writing what could have been a third Sons of Apollo album, but it ended up becoming a new band, Whom Gods Destroy. So we made that album during the pandemic. And Jeff Scott Soto, the singer of Sons of Apollo, said, oh, you know, why don't you do Art of Anarchy with me singing? And we can have some fun with this and do some more stuff together. I was like, sure. So that's when the third Art of Anarchy album came together, Let There Be Anarchy. And there's this wonderful band called the Dodies, D-O-D-I-E-S, that have been producing their albums, recording and mixing and mastering and everything. And they're just wonderful. So we started working on their second album and third album during that time. So I had a lot of stokes in the fire at that point. And when the Bumblefoot album was done by June of 2023, at that same time, the Whom Gods Destroy album was getting finished, and putting everything together with the record label and doing the music videos. And the same thing was happening with Art of Anarchy, dealing with the record label and music videos. And I was recording during that time an album that's going to come out very soon, Dreamism from the Dodies. We were in the studio recording that. So I had 10 other people and 3 other record labels that were depending on me. So the needs of the many needed to outweigh the needs of the one or the few, if I could quote Spock. So from there, I put my album aside for a while. Instead of working on everything that it takes to put this album out, because I wasn't just going to throw it on Spotify and just leave it at that. I wanted to put a lot of artwork into this, and music videos, and a video game, and a comic book, and a tablature book with all the music written out, and all of this stuff. I wanted to do a lot for it. So I put mine on hold. And by spring of 2024, everything else was taken care of and done. Art of Anarchy did some shows, the album was out. Whom Gods Destroy, the album was out, more videos. And then I picked up where I left off and continued with the music video for the opening track, Simon in Space. And it's an 8-minute song, so it was a lot of animating. And I was getting the help of a good, talented friend of mine, Radek Grabinski, out in Poland, who has a video game company. He was helping with the music video, and he made a video game. If you go on to bumblefoot.com, you will see links there to watch this crazy music video, and also to play this free, fun, retro throwback space shooter video game where you're Simon, my cat, in the spaceship that looks like the one he's in on the cover, and you just hold down the button or keep your finger on the phone and just move it around, and he's just shooting while all the alien mice and fish and birds and asteroids made of cheese and everything are flying around and you hit those and get your power-up points and they're shooting back at you. And it's just a fun game. I wanted it to be a fun album release with a lot going on. So even the physical products that we made, like the vinyl, the CD, we did cassettes. My first album was on cassette. Why not? Just everything since my first album came out in '95, all the evolution and everything that's become available, I've made available. So vinyl, CDs, cassettes, downloading, streaming, everything, video games. So it is on cassette. Everything is full of a ton of artwork.
Wow.
And the album, full of art. Open it up, more art. You take out 2 discs. Artwork on the sleeves, more artwork on this one, and even the vinyl itself. 3 sides of music, a 4th side of artwork.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's clear so that when you're watching when you're playing side 3, you can see the spaceship spinning and everything. So I wanted to go all out and just give as much as I could for this album and for the people that want to experience it. So they could listen a million different ways. They can watch the video and use their eyes as well. They can play video games so that they're interactively doing something while they're listening to the music. Like music from the album is playing in the background while you're playing the game. And a lot more to come. I teamed up with Deco Records, who are a great record label, wonderful guys. And they're handling the retail distro so that if you go into a record store, there's still a few of those around. And you say, do you have this album? And they'll say, no, but we can get it. And it's in their system. So some that might carry it, but it'll be available. And they're teamed up with Cargo Records in the UK, so it'll be out there. And they are immersed in the comic book world. So we're going to make a Bumblefoot comic book. Look at this cover. It's dying to be a comic book.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to do that. And I wrote out the entire album, all the transcribing of every finger used, every direction of the pick, the musical notation, the tablature for every single sound made on that album that a guitar or a bass made. So the publisher is working on the typesetting and everything of that, and that'll be available. All the weird guitar sounds that I have on this album. There's some interesting guitar tones that you could only make with modern gear. Like now what they have is all these pedal boards that are digital simulations of every amp you can imagine, and with every knob on every amp, and every type of speaker and microphone and angle and distance, and every stomp box of every kind of effect. And you could put them into these weird routings that would be impossible in the analog world. So you could get so creative with guitar sounds now. So I'm making all of those available too that people can download and get from the company line6.com. They have a marketplace where people share all their tones, their guitar sounds. So I have everything from this album available there as well. So I'm just doing everything I can, whatever I can give. Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing me on so that I could talk about it and let people know it's happening. Yeah.
Well, what I find amazing too is like going back to how we started the conversation, as a kid, you wanting to be an astronaut and be in space. And now it's like everything has come back together for this Bumblefoot Returns album. Everything's full circle, right?
It really has. And do you find that like at our age, we tend to do that? We take our entire life and assess it all and start just taking the unticked boxes and saying, you know what, this is what I wanted to do as a kid. I'm going to incorporate that into my life now. And just pretty much whatever I didn't do, you know what, some people call that a midlife crisis, but I call it just completing your life and just doing all the things that you can do and always wanted to do and just really enjoying life.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah,
that's like I was saying why I do this podcast, from going as a little kid on the cassette tapes to today now,
Exactly. Exactly.
I think, returning back to when life was less chaotic, and embracing that inner child can be a good thing sometimes, and healing for us and so many others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that's the core of who you are. It's almost like the initial rungs in a tree, and we build out from there. But that is truly the core of who we are, and it shouldn't be forgotten. It should be nurtured and taken care of and kept strong and solid. You need a solid foundation, and that starts, with that, and what both of us are doing right now. Yeah.
Yep. Amen. And then, with the new, I mean, it was like this was like your first coming back to doing strictly an instrumental after, that Shrapnel Records debut, The Adventures of Bumblefoot that you were talking about. Why do you feel like now is the time to come back and put out a instrumental album?
It was all about the pandemic, suddenly having the time to do the things and get the ball rolling on things that you always said, yeah, someday I'll do that, someday. So I just thought about all the people that asked me over the years, hey, would you ever do another acoustic EP like you did in 2008? So I did 2 of them and stuck them on Bandcamp. Then all the people that said, hey, you haven't done an instrumental album since that first one. Would you ever do another one? All right, let's do it. So I started writing and made it happen. It's all about just having time. Yeah, I guess talking about the universe as entropy continues toward its maximum, if there is one, more chaos ensues. And I think that happens in life as well. Just life gets more complex and there's less time to do the things that you had to do, that you could do at the beginning. Or maybe it's just more, I think of it this way usually. I get philosophical. We're like a tree. You start off, there's not a lot of branches, and those branches aren't very heavy, and there's not branches off of those branches. But after a while, that tree is so full, and you have so much going on these different branches, that you have to start scaling it back and trimming them and saying, you know what, this one's got to come off. I got to stop with this. This one, I just got to clean up a little bit, and you have to start pulling it back. Otherwise, life just becomes an impossible juggling act. There's just too much going on. Yeah.
Yes, do a little pruning along the way.
Right? A whole lot of pruning. So having that sudden, unexpected time allowed a lot of musicians to get off that touring hamster wheel that we're just running and running on, and be able to just be in one place and build momentum to do creative things that there wasn't time to do before, or just we didn't make time to do before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I look back too, like, and I was thankfully, I'm in recovery, so it's like I'm 15 years sober, and I thankfully have a group of other minds, because mine can get pretty crazy, that I can lean on and leech off of. But during that time frame, of uncertainty and fear, there, like you made it a positive. You turned it into something to be grateful for and be creative. Like, I have 2 adult daughters that live with me, and we're more like roommates now. But during that time frame, they had to hang out with Dad again. And it was like a blessing to be able to rebuild that relationship and those connections and stuff, because of the world got to pause for a little bit, So it's like a lot of people unfortunately suffered a lot of tragic things. A lot of people I know that were in recovery went back out and unfortunately didn't come back. But there was a lot to be grateful for during that time period. And I guess it's about how you reframe your thinking. So I like what you were saying, Yeah,
100%. Absolutely. It's all, it's up to us. We can look at it from any angle and decide what it is from there. Either it's something scary and we can focus on that, or it's the gift of time, which is one of the greatest gifts you can get, more time. and focus on that and say, what am I going to do with this time? And it's an opportunity to better yourself. But it's all up to us. We are handed opportunities if we choose to recognize them as such.
Yeah. Now, what I noticed too, though, what for you coming back and doing Bumblefoot Returns, now being the time as well, not just, because you were able to pause and create, but your journey since the first one obviously has helped you form a lot of new relationships and friendships along the way. And you were able to include some of those relationships now in this. You had Steve Vai, you had, and Brian May, just to name a few, guests on the album. So, how did those relationships come together during your journey?
It just happens organically. Just you're in the same place at the same time. With Steve Vai, there's this email thread for about 10 years of a bunch of guitar player friends and friends of their friends, where we all just daily just talk about anything and everything. And in fact, the 13th song on the album, The Thread, is named after them. I named it after them. That's why it's called The Thread, because that's just what we call it. It's like the thread, where thread mates, thread brothers. And Steve is on The Thread. So I had this one song, and I didn't plan on guests. It's just that after the songs were coming together and becoming what they are, you start realizing that there's certain things that a song needs that someone else can give better than you can. So in that song Monstruoso that Steve Vai is on, it needed a guitar solo that sounded like it was from an alien, not from this world. So he is the perfect candidate to do something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So I asked him, and he did. And I'm grateful. So yeah, the song Once and Forever, it's just has so many melodies and all these big guitar harmonies going on. And where the first guitar solo section is, where it opens up, and I could just imagine these riffs following the melody, and all I could hear was Brian May in there. The song would not be right if it wasn't him. And I could have taken his approach and done it myself and imitated him, but it would not be giving the song what it deserved. So I asked Brian if he would do it, and he did.
Nice.
Yeah, the song, that sad funeral march song, it needed this crying violin. That's certainly not something I can do. I can make a violin sound like cats fighting. That's about it. But so I went to my favorite band, Thank You Scientist, and asked the violinist if he would play on it, and he did. So I'm thankful and grateful that everyone that's on there are on there. The drummer of that song, Once and Forever, that Brian May is on, is an old friend of mine, Jerry Gaskill, from the band King's X. Incredible band. And every time we would go out to dinner, in fact, we'll be grabbing dinner in a couple of days again, we always say, oh, we should do a song together. So it just seemed like the perfect song for him. And he came here and laid drums, and it's wonderful. It sounds just like Jerry, is tasty, that great feel he has. And then all the other drums on there, this incredible drummer, he's been my drummer for 10 years, named Kyle Hughes. Met him when he was only 16 years old. I was doing a show in Newcastle, UK. He offered to play drums for me. And actually I have his whole band that were opening for me, learn my music and be my backing band for that show. And he just stole the show at 16 years old. He was a monster. He played his ass off. Phenomenal. And I was like, this kid's got to be my drummer. And for 10 years, he's been my drummer. And he's gone on to do wonderful things. He's playing with Paul Stanley's son, Evan. They have a band together called Amber Wild.
Oh, yeah, I saw them.
Yeah. And Richie Kotzen, he's been playing with him on Richie's solo stuff. And Graham Bonnet from Alcatraz with Yngwie and Rainbow. And Marco Mendoza, the bass player, was touring with him for a while. And so he's doing greater and greater things. And he's going to be definitely one of those go-to drummers that for decades that people say, oh, I need a drummer. Oh, try and get Kyle Hughes. Because there's nothing he can do. He's fantastic. And he's just a wonderful guy and great to work with and just a great friend. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'll tell you, the song that I really was drawn to on this album was Moonshine Hootenanny. It like awakened something in my DNA because my dad's family is from Alabama, and I would hear stories, you know, and I was just like really feeling that one. But I wanted to ask real quick too about your thimble technique.
Ah, yes. So what that is when I was younger, I always had an overactive brain, and I got progressively dumber over the years. Every year I get stupider. But back when I wasn't as stupid, I was playing guitar, and you realize that the notes continue even after the neck ends and the fretboard ends. So I wanted to find a way to get those notes and to get them to sustain. So instead of pressing the string against the metal frets on the fretboard of the neck, and the string vibrates from that point to the end, I do the reverse. I have this metal thimble that I keep on my picking hand on the smallest finger that I touch down to the string with enough force to make the string vibrate, and it's almost like a mobile fret that I'm touching to the string. Instead of pressing the string against the fret, I'm touching this piece of metal against the string, and I get to continue the notes beyond the fretboard using that. So it's almost like a mobile neck extension. And the way to find those notes when you don't have any guide is just a little bit of science. When a string is vibrating at a certain speed, if you cut the length of the string exactly in half, it doubles the speed. And what that sounds like is an octave. And what is an octave? It's when you go, me, 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 do, do, do. That first note, last note, la, la. Just think of the knack. Think of my Sharona.
Yeah.
Those are octaves. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, say, can you see? Boom, boom, doo, doo. Those are octaves. And what they are multiples of a speed, a frequency, we can call it, that the string is vibrating. So if the string is vibrating 110 times a second, if you cut the string in half, it'll vibrate 220 times a second, which sounds like what we call an octave. La bum 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 bum. So knowing this, what you can do is you can visually, you just look at the neck and count backward and say, okay, what note do I want to play the higher octave of? And let's say you're on the 17th fret at high A note. What you do is you picture where that fret is and look at that length of string. You cut it in half with your eyes and touch the thimble down, and that's where you will find that higher note. So that is what I do. And also, a lot of times what I do is I hold the thimble in front of the bridge so that it's shortening the length of vibrating string from the other direction, and that raises the pitch as well. So I play from both directions of the string using the thimble. And if you watch the Simon in Space video, about halfway through where there's a close-up playing the guitar solo, you can see me doing that, where I'm hitting notes and and I'm like raising the pitch from this direction instead of going and doing it here. I'm doing it over there.
Nice.
So that is my thimble technique that I've been doing for many decades. Yes.
Amazing. I have so many more questions I wanted to talk to you about, but I know we're running short on time.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do a round 2 at some point.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to schedule a round 2. But I wanted to pitch something really quick. You're a hot sauce entrepreneur, and I wanted to hopefully have you back around 2 to talk about that. But my good friend Florida Frank's also in the same business. Maybe you guys should get together and do a collaboration. He's plays guitar for the band Hatebreed.
Oh, you know, it's so funny because so many people that are into rock and metal are into hot sauce. And I've thought about this as well. Why? It's because metal is the most intense music there is. It makes people want to jump into a crowd and elbow each other in the face with love. And no other music can make you do that. Now, what would be the food equivalent? Hot sauce. There is nothing that you can legally ingest that will make you run screaming around a room with your nose running, your eyes tearing, sweating, wanting to chug a gallon of milk and then want more of it. Yeah, so hot sauce is the heavy metal of food. And that is why when we make music and we want to give people that intense experience, if we want to do the food version of it, we make hot sauce. So you'll find a lot of metal musicians also are into making hot sauce.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely have to set up a part 2 because I had some more questions I wanted to run by you. But before I let you go to the next one, could I ask one last favor?
Sure, yeah.
You mind cutting a promo ID for the show? Just introduce yourself and you're listening to today's Boondoggle?
Of course, happy to. All right. Hello, everybody. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and you are listening to today's oh my God, I fucked up. Okay, one more time. You can actually use that one. Boondoggle. my lips stopped working.
Bumblefoot and Boondoggle, you know?
I know how to speak, I swear. Hello, everybody. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle. Or should I say podcast at the end?
Oh, that's fine. That's fine there.
We'll do one more. We got the time. Ready?
All right.
Number 3. Hello, everybody. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and you are listening to today's Boondoggle podcast.
Awesome. Awesome. Perfect. Ron, thank you so much, man. It was awesome talking to you. And like I said, we definitely got to do a part 2. There's more I'd like to talk to you about, especially get back in more deeper into the hot sauce and everything as well.
Oh, yeah. We got to talk hot sauce. And I will make a moonshine hootenanny hot sauce to go with the album.
Nice, nice. And real quick too, where can people pick up if they want to order the album? I definitely want to order the album with all the sleeves and the art and everything. Where can people get that?
You can get it at bumblefoot.com, and you can also get it at DEKO entertainment.com. Both of those.
Great, great. I'm going to put my order in now. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. I look forward to chatting again.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.